lovely delay where everybody's connecting. So we don't really want to start yet because we don't want you to miss anything, but want to get it live and get going there. All right. Well, I know we'll have a couple of folks joining in as they can here, but we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon or good evening to you, depending on where in the globe you are joining us from. My name is Ginny, and I am with Anderson's Bookshops. We are based outside of Chicago, Illinois. And on behalf of Anderson's, as well as our co-host store, Midtown Scholar, I'd like to take a moment to thank you for being with us today. As independent bookstores all across the country, we are grateful for your support in each of our communities. Our stores are offering both live and virtual events for every reader, so please visit our respective websites and social media platforms to find your next event. We'd love to have you. Quick accessibility note, we have turned on the live transcript feature, so if you'd like subtitles or a full transcript as provided by Zoom, you can choose that using the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. But today, we are so thrilled to be celebrating the release of Someone Else's Shoes, the latest from Jojo Moyes, who is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Giver of Stars, Still Me, Paris for One Other Stories, After You, 1+1, The Girl You Left Behind, Me Before You, The Last Letter from Your Lover, The Horse Dancer, Night Music, Silver Bay, The Ship of Brides, and The Peacock Emporium. Also a screenwriter, Jojo is joining us today from London, England. Welcome, Jojo. Thank you so much.
Hi.
And moderating our conversation today is Lisa Jewell, a fellow #1 New York Times bestselling author. She has 19 novels, including The Family Upstairs and Then She Was Gone, as well as The Invisible Girl and Watching You. Her novels have sold over 10 million copies internationally, and her work has also been translated into 29 languages. Her newest novels, which you can peep right behind her there, are The Family Remains and None of This Is True. And she is also joining us from England. Welcome, Lisa. Thanks to both of you for being here.
Me.
Well, I can't wait to hear what you two have to say about, of course, Jojo's new book, but also what you're doing as well, Lisa, and what the world is like for writers right now. So I'll let you to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And hi, Jojo.
Hi.
We're actually, what do you think we are? Like half a mile?
Apart?
Not even a mile. Half a mile, I would say. So yeah, I'm sort of waving through my back window at you across North London. Right, so something Jojo said to me just now in the green room when I was talking about how this conversation was going to run was, oh, don't worry, Lisa, I trust you. And I have to confess that I would normally say no to moderating a chat with another writer. It is not in my skill set. It's not my strong suit. And I have this sort of recurring nightmare of doing an Instagram live with Paula Hawkins last year, during which I completely failed to ask her about her book. And she very, very politely just went along with the conversation and didn't try and drag her book into it. So the very first thing I want to ask you about, Jojo, just so I don't make the same mistake again, before we talk about all the other lovely stuff that we can talk about, is Jojo, please tell us about your new book. And can I also just say that I was very, very fortunate enough to have read Jojo's book last year when it was but a Word document. And it had been a couple of years since or maybe even longer since I'd read one of your books, because I hadn't read The Giver of Stars. And it was just one of those glorious coming home moments. The minute I started reading it, it was just like safe pair of arms around me. It's just like, oh, I remember this. I remember Jojo's voice. I remember Jojo's warmth. I remember the way Jojo brings characters to life and just breathes oxygen, everything she writes. And yes, it was just joyful, and I was very, very honored and yeah, very happy to have had that early opportunity to read it. So over to you, Jojo. Tell us about Someone Else's Shoes.
Okay, so Someone Else's Shoes, it's quite plotty, so I'm not going to tell you a lot about the plot because it's got a few twists and turns in it, but it's basically the story of two women in their 40s, very different women. We have Nisha on one side, who's an American trophy wife, been married 18 years, who is obsessed with her wardrobe and her appearance. She's germphobic. She's quite spiky. She's not the easiest person to deal with. And she's kind of a self-made woman, something that she reflects in how she dresses. And on the other side, we have Sam, who's a 40-something print worker from England, London, England, who is what I would call the squeezed middle. She's that generation of women who are dealing with teenage children, elderly parents, a boss at work who basically considers her invisible and surplus to his needs. He's a new young executive who basically doesn't recognize anyone female over the age of 28. And she's dealing with a husband who's got depression but won't do anything about it. And she's kind of invisible to herself. She's one of those women who's so busy holding up everybody else that she's completely forgotten who she is. And these two women accidentally swap gym bags on a crisis day in both their lives. And the book is about what happens to both of them as a result when they are literally forced to walk in someone else's shoes.
And I recall you giving me quite a nice little elevator pitch for this book before I started reading it. Can you remember what it was?
No, tell me.
Wasn't it Desperately Seeking Susan meets... What was it you said?
Oh, what did I say?
It was like one of those snappy, it was Desperately Seeking Susan meets...
I don't know, but I think of it now as Trading Places for menopausal women.
Ah, okay, it's evolved. It's evolved
Yeah.
since then, but it does.
I need
I
to
think
remember what I pitched at you though, because it was obviously good.
yeah, no, it was, and it was. And Desperately Seeking Susan is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Oh, me too.
And for me, that was just instant sell into the whole concept of the book.
Well, I think I wanted to explore, and it's interesting, since I've been talking about this, I realize it's no coincidence that I wrote it during lockdown, but I was trying to explore, who are we when our armor, when our normal support structures are stripped away? And of course, now I realize why I was writing it, because we all had all our stuff stripped away, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's always really interesting to read the books that came out of that lockdown period of our lives, because I can feel it. I read the same authors over and over again.
Me too.
And there was definitely a different flavor to the books that my favorite writers wrote during that time or immediately after that time, and in completely different ways, not all in the same way. We didn't all go down the same tunnel and explore the same themes, but there were definitely, I mean, because for you, for example, this is your first contemporary novel since the Me Before You trilogy.
Yeah.
So what was I suppose that would be the sort of obvious answer to wanting to write about what we'd all been through, is to...
Well, yeah, I mean, I think like everybody, I just had a really miserable time. Personally, I had quite a difficult time, and like everybody else, I really struggled in lockdown. And what I found was that when I watched something or read something, I was searching out things that were lighter than normal. I wanted to be uplifted. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to just feel taken out of myself for a few hours. And so when I finally started writing again, that was what I wanted to write, which was the same thing. The Giver of Stars, my last book, was probably, I don't know, I don't want to say the deepest, because that's not quite right, but it came from somewhere so visceral in me. Yeah. All my obsessions and all the things I cared about were in that book. And I couldn't go there again, not straight away. I needed to write something that was almost like a palate cleanser.
But there's also, I think, the you had to physically leave your own area of existence in order to go and experience another way of living, to research that book. I mean, you put yourself, I'm going to talk about The Giver of Stars now. Yeah. You put yourself in a log cabin in the middle of
3
Kentucky.
times.
Yeah. And so that was the sort of luxury we had in the pre-COVID days of being able to do something like that. Whereas with this, obviously, you're then back to the sort of nuts and bolts of what's sitting in front of you and what's already inside your head.
And in fact, I was going to write a book set in Venice. That was the book I'd planned to write. And it was partly set in Venice and partly set in television news. And I had wanted to get access to the BBC's production rooms, which was what I needed. And then I couldn't do any of those things. So I had to shelve that project and think of something else. And
so the Family Remains, there's a subplot in it. Well, it's a main plot in it where a character was at the end of the previous book, The Family Upstairs, was all set to go on a safari to Botswana. And then lockdown happened, and I thought, well, I can't write about a character going on safari in Botswana without actually having experienced it myself.
Yeah.
So I had to immediately backpedal and think, what the hell am I going to do with this character instead if he can't go to Botswana? So he goes to Chicago instead. So
That's so interesting, because I would never have guessed that from reading it.
yeah,
I
just
realized that you'd originally meant to go somewhere else. The Chicago thing works perfectly.
because I had spent an hour in Chicago, you see, so I'm a total expert in Chicago.
Yeah, we should write a guidebook next. Yeah.
Another massive theme, I think, in Someone Else's Shoes, and I know you've talked about this a lot, and I've seen a lot of the publicity you've been doing on to support this book, but I would love to hear it from you again, is this whole theme of female friendship, because I know we are friends. I'm going to come back to that later. Yeah. We are friends, and we support each other, and we have a WhatsApp group, and we're there with all our sort of day-to-day, the tiny little bothersome details of our lives to the huge traumas of our lives. So I know how important female friendship is to you, but can you talk about that a little bit, particularly in how it connects with this book?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to celebrate 4 capable women who lifted each other up. I mean, I just like middle-aged women in fiction don't tend to be celebrated. They're either the cheated on spouse or the really annoying mother of someone who just wants to have a relationship, or they just don't tend to be A-list characters in their own right. And I feel like the tide is slightly changing, but what has meant a huge amount to me over the last 3.5 years is my female friends. And what I noticed more than ever was that when you're in your 20s and 30s, I don't want to say there's competition, because that implies that we're pitting each other against each other, which I don't think is the case. But what it is there's a kind of underlying anxiety, because you're constantly judging your own life against the women that you know. So from, should I have got engaged? They've got engaged. Or have I got the right job? Should I be buying an apartment by now? Should I be on a different career path? And we're constantly looking around at our friends and going, should I have what they have? And judging ourselves as a result. And something happens, I think, by the time you're 40 or 50, which is that we are all survivors of something. Everybody I know who is lucky enough to get to this age has got through something massive. I mean, and all of us have got through something massive over the last couple of years. But I just find now that when I speak to friends, there's no attempt to gloss over anything. There's no attempt to present something perfect or any kind of image. I feel like we're all just straight in there with the important stuff, like, how are you? How's your depressed child? How's your unhappy marriage? How's your whatever?
How's your menopause?
Yeah, how's your menopause? It's just, I feel like there's something really lovely and empathetic about this age that was probably already there to a degree, but it feels like, or maybe it's just the pandemic, that we've all just got no time for small talk. We just want to get straight in. And I just feel like every time I meet a bunch of women, within 5 minutes we're into the meat and bones and gristle of it. We're not fanning around talking about oh, nice curtains. It's like
well, we do. I think we compliment each other's curtains too.
We do curtains as well.
Curtains are still important at our age, but but no, you're right. There is so much less time, and I do think that. Interestingly, I sat down for breakfast with a young millennial child a couple of weeks ago, a female. And I found myself talking in this sort of elder stateswomanly kind of way to her. I just wanted her to know that it's all fine, that, I think she was 31. And I just suddenly realized that she's in that place in her 30s where you're constantly feeling like you're leaving things too late.
Yeah.
Is it too late to be in a serious relationship? Is it too late to be in the right career trajectory? Is it too late to have a baby? I mean, good God, that's sort of, and you're constantly questioning and double questioning yourself about whether you've done things in the right order at the right time. And as you say, looking around. And then you get to our age and suddenly it just feels still.
Yeah.
And there's some great peace and beauty in losing youth. I don't know about you, but I really, really have no sadness or nostalgia for being young. Do you ever wish that you could be young again?
Oh, I wouldn't want to be young, but I
No.
would like my 30-year-old neck back. Thank
Oh,
you.
we'd
Mum.
all like
Right.
that. Yes.
Yeah.
They'll invent a
Um,
pill in a few years' time, and we'll just take the pill and we'll get our chin back, and then
that
it
would
will
be
be
it. Yeah.
perfect.
No, I
But
think,
yes,
but that's it. And I just wanted to write a book where those women, those exact women, were center stage, but also, I mean, they're really different. But I think what you're capable of doing in your late 40s and early 50s in a way that you might not have been much younger is grasping someone else's essential humanity and recognizing warmth or empathy or goodness when you're confronted by, or the opposite, recognizing if you really don't want anything to do with someone. I mean, I can tell my people within 5 seconds, and I just sort of think, oh, you're not my people. Okay, that's fine.
don't you look back to your younger years and remember how many people you had in your life who you didn't enjoy?
Yes. Yes.
I didn't enjoy being them there. They sucked things out of you.
Yeah.
They were negative. They made a negative
Brains
impact.
rather than radiators. Yeah.
Yes, and that's another thing that happens, I think, when you get older. As you say, your filter is so finely tuned, and you know exactly what sort of person you want to. So this brings me, I think, very nicely to.
Okay.
So I had to ask Jojo a couple of days ago how old her youngest child is, because I first met Jojo when she was very, very heavily pregnant with her youngest child. And that takes us to 2005 was the first time I met Jojo.
Okay.
Which is
tell the thing about the size you thought I was.
Yes, well, this is the so there was back in the very late 90s, early noughties, when the internet was all new and shiny, and there was a whole batch of young mainly female authors coming up through the London publishing scene off the back of Bridget Jones, and someone's husband was a geek and he made us an internet chat room, which was a very new idea back in the day. And this was like our little water cooler. It was our place. There was no social media, and it was just a place that we could rock up and talk about the minutiae of our lives and our new book jackets, what we were having for dinner, and we all got very, very close. And every now and then we'd let a new person into our inner sanctum, and Jojo was such a new person. And so yes, the very first time I met Jojo, she had been invited along as our new member of our chat room, and we went for a Christmas dinner, I believe, at a posh members club in Shaftesbury Avenue. And Jojo was gigantic. I mean, you were gigantic. I don't know how much that baby weighed, but you had this sort of big belt thing on under your bump to support your bump, because your bump was big.
9 pounds 11, and I was not
and you're
a person.
No, but the funny thing about that was, because Jojo was gigantic the first time I met her, and then remained even postpartum, you know, wasn't in any rush, just being a normal, healthy human being, letting her body go back to normal at its own natural pace. It was at least 2 or 3 years before I looked at Jojo and realized she was absolutely tiny.
You'd assume there was a larger person.
Assume that Jojo was quite a chunky girl. But yes, no, Jojo, it is, if anybody's seen her at a real life event, is an absolutely tiny pocket-sized person. But so yeah, when I first met you in 2005, I think, had you just published or were about to publish Ship of Brides, your 4th novel?
That would be about right. Yeah.
And you'd had 3 novels before that, and they'd all done quite nicely.
Kind of okay.
Quite well. I'd heard of you. I'd heard of Jojo Moyes. Yeah. And then this amazing novel came out called The Last Letter from Your Lover, which is one of my favorite Jojo Moyes novels. And that was a turning point in your career, because your publishers decided not to renew your contract, and you had this crazy idea for your next novel, and a lot of people weren't very keen on touching it.
The idea,
that idea, and this was just to be witness to what happened to Jojo at that point in her career was quite magical. It was quite extraordinary. And it, for me, it just encapsulates the magic of the publishing industry, because everyone who writes a book is on the cusp of this happening to them. It can happen to anyone at any time, and it happened to Jojo. And I'd love to hear it from you, that when you finally, you are out of contract, you'd written this beautiful dual timeline historical.
And I'd probably been checking in on our kind of group chat every day, just being extremely worried about my career, not sure if anyone else was going to hire me to write books for them, just really feeling quite anxious. And I think I'd built an extension on the back of my house to take in lodgers, because that's how worried we were about paying for everything. And then Me Before You went to Penguin Michael Joseph in the UK, and it was picked up by a television book club called Richard and Judy, and it just started to do that word of mouth thing that every writer dreams of. So, you know, we sold a good few thousand in the first week, and then I kept thinking, well, it'll go down in a minute, and it'll go down in a minute, and then weeks went on and it didn't, and then it became months, and then other countries bought it. And I think there were about 2 years where I didn't even look at the numbers, because I felt like I was in a daze. And yeah, it just changed my life completely. And the lovely thing about my writer friends, Lisa included, is that because we've all been up and we've all been down, nobody treats you any differently, because we all know how fickle things are. And sometimes you'll write a fantastic book and the time will be wrong, or the cover will be wrong, and it will do nothing. And sometimes you'll write a mediocre book, but it just happens to touch on something of that time, and it'll explode into fireworks, and you never know which of those it's going to be.
And it is the thing that keeps people writing and writing and writing, and it's magic to me. And I love the fact that it's also not associated with your age either. It's not so, it hasn't got some sort of use by date on it, the publishing magic. It can happen at any point in your career with any book that you write. And I don't think there are that many in fields of work where you're constantly just sort of peeping over the edge at something that could be life.
Bonnie Garmus in Lessons in Chemistry. I mean, she's late 50s, early 60s, I'm not sure, but that was that.
I think older than us, I think she is. Yeah. And that was her first novel.
Fantastic book, global bestseller. Wonderful.
Yeah, no, it is. It's absolutely extraordinary. And I do have to ask you if you would ever go back to Lou.
No, I did go back to her in lockdown. I wrote a short story which we put out for free on, I think, both the Penguin UK and Penguin US websites. And it felt like an appropriate time to revisit her, because I just immediately imagined her stuck back in her childhood home with her parents, and so it made sense. But I don't think I would. You know, Lou in lockdown, I left her in a very particular place, and I don't think I should revisit her again.
That's interesting that you wrote a trilogy of books about her, but you just needed that extra little full stop for you to feel.
I'd always felt that was where, but it was such a strange out of time that I thought we could just, I don't know, pop in a little side story. And it was really good, actually, because I was one of those writers who couldn't write when we were locked down. You did, I know you did. And every time I emailed Jodie Picoult, she'd written another bloody book. I couldn't believe it. She was just like a machine. And I kept going, my brain is fudge. How come you guys are writing?
Well, I tell you what happened to me is exactly the same thing happened to me. I was 3,000 words into a novel when lockdown hit. And then I just went into that same stasis that everybody else went into, of like, hold on, sorry, you think I'm going to write a book in the middle of this about people who are not experiencing this? I can't. But luckily my editor is an absolute, well, I should be polite. She was very, very forceful in she phoned me once a week and would say, how's the book going? I'd say, well, I haven't done anything. Obviously I haven't done anything. I just can't. And then about 5 weeks in, she said, you know, you have to write this book, don't you? And I just thought, okay, I need to find a way out of this stasis. And what I actually did was I threw money at it. I rented an office. I just thought
I remember
I
you
need to
renting an
completely
office.
mix it up. I need to change it up, and I need to get out of this house that's full of hand sanitizer and teenagers and dogs that need walking and all that sort of business. And so, yeah, I rented that. So I kind of cheated in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would have got out of that if I hadn't had a place to escape to every day. So yeah, that was the only way that I managed to do that. But yeah, it was such a weird time. There was this other WhatsApp group. Jojo and I are on one sort of WhatsApp group, and there was this huge lockdown WhatsApp group of about 30 writers, and it was called the Gin Club. And it was basically 30 writers not writing. And I had to leave that WhatsApp group because I felt so guilty that I was writing, and that I was being really put in touch. I thought, oh, this is no place for me.
Oh, that's funny. I think Jodie Picoult did the same thing to me that your editor did to you, because I was just sort of mumping around going, I can't do this, I can't do this. And then she kept writing these books, and then she said, you've got to get on with it. And when I finally wrote, I think 20,000 words, she asked me where they were, and I said, I don't think, it's not my usual thing, I'm not sure if it works. And she just went, send it over. And so I sent it over, and then she literally read it by the next day and messaged me saying, I want the rest of the book. And it was like,
and this is it, this is someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
So we got her to thank.
I have got Jodie Picoult to them, because she's you don't say no to Jodie. She's quite forthright. And the weirdest thing is we'd had this long email correspondence and I'd never met her. So the first time I met her was actually November just gone, when she came to London. And so we squeezed in a quick meal together, and I was absolutely taken aback to find out that she was tiny. She's as short as I am.
Smaller than you?
I'm not a tall person. She is smaller than me.
Wow.
Because there's something about Jodie's presence that made me assume that she was kind of Amazonian. I thought she was going to be a kind of tall, I don't know. But it was lovely. It was lovely to meet somebody in the flesh who, I think this is a writer's thing. We have so many kind of correspondence with each other.
Yes.
It's
unless you live in the same city, it's you feel like you know someone because you chat with them all the time, or you sometimes see them on the screen if you're doing an online event with them. But
I should say, actually, Lisa has performed this same function for me over the years with certain books. We have given each other endings of each other's books, haven't we, to say, does this work? You know.
Yes. We've done some. We did a great workshop, I think, of the last letter from your lover. No, the girl in the picture. Girl in the picture.
The girl you left behind.
The girl you left behind.
Yeah.
We did a massive workshop on that on the Eurostar from London to Paris once, I remember. See, it's funny. I think a lot of people wonder about authors talking to each other about their big ideas and think maybe like authors are really possessive and private about their ideas in case someone steals it. But I don't think there's any better person to talk to about your work in progress than another writer. Absolutely. Quite often. So talking of works in progress, there was a big gap between your Giver of Stars and this one, while you were sorting your life out. Is there another one on the way? And if so, are you going back to your historical dual timelines, or are you
well, I've started
staying contemporary?
But I haven't got to the magical 20,000 word point yet, when I don't know about you, but I can't commit to something till I'm at least 20 or 30,000 words in. And that's when I get a gut feeling about whether it's going to work or not. I do tend to shelve about 50% of my projects at that point. Why are you shocked?
No. See, honestly, I can't. I'm completely committed. I'm committed. Once I've started, I'm committed. There's no turning back.
Oh, that's so interesting.
I'll stick with
anyway, I don't want to tell you about it in case I change my mind.
Okay, but may I ask, is it contemporary?
It's contemporary.
Right. And is it sort of, we would call this a caper? Would we call someone else's shoes?
It's not a caper. This was very capery. I saw that someone asked the question, where did the idea for this come from? It just popped up. And I'm going to say it actually came from a short story that I wrote 15 years ago that appeared in the collection Paris for One, where I just wrote it was for a women's magazine, I think, because we often in the UK get asked to write little stories for women's magazines. And I wrote this story about a middle-aged woman who is a bit down in the dumps, who accidentally picks up the wrong gym bag and the effect it has on her day. And over the years, when I've been working in America, I've spoken to various production companies who've said to me, could you do anything with that? And I always said, no, it's just a tiny one day in the life story. There's no way I could expand it. And then I think I'd watched Desperately Seeking Susan.
There you go.
It's one of those films I watch every couple of years. I actually watched it again a couple of weeks ago. And I suddenly thought, well, what happened to the other woman whose gym bag was taken? And as soon as I saw it as two women whose paths keep crossing and whose fortunes go up and down, suddenly it felt like fun. Suddenly I felt like I had the thing that I wanted to do. But you need that germ of something to kind of get you excited, to get you over that first hurdle of doubt.
But yeah, but for me, the very fact that I've typed the words chapter 1 and started writing means I've already had that feeling. I'm not looking for it 20 or 30,000 words in. If I haven't already got that feeling about it, then it's not happening.
You and I work in extremely different ways, because you're not a plotter, you're a pantser, aren't you?
I am, I think, possibly the ultimate pantser in the whole writing universe.
It actually makes me go cold to think about it. Lisa's book that's coming out soon, called None of This Is True, has a genius couple of twists right at the end. And I said to her the other day, gosh, when did you think up the final twists? And she said, oh, while I was writing them. I was really pleased with that. And that just makes me want to go and bang my head against the wall, because I'm there with my 800 post-it notes covering my dining table, moving things around. And Lisa just goes, let's see what happens. And then it magically happens.
Yes, it is. And it's a lot of it is to do with keeping the faith and trusting my instincts. And that's definitely something. Whereas for so many years of my career, I thought I was doing it all wrong and I should be like you. And if only I could write like you with plans and post-it notes and structures in place, then everything would be so much better. And then part of the confidence of becoming an older writer, a more mature writer, was just thinking, no, this is how I do it, and embrace
how it works for me.
And just absolutely thinking, if I've written this down on the page, there's a reason why it's there. Now I'm just going to have to make it work, even if I hadn't expected to write that thing. And in fact, somebody wrote to me earlier today who I'm one of his favorite writers, and he has another favorite female writer who writes in the same genre that I write in, and he's reading her current book, having just read mine. And he loves us both, but he said the difference is the energy in your books is so random. And I really liked that. He said you can tell when you read your books that nothing just put in place, you know.
That's so interesting.
Deliberately, whereas the other writer is a famous planner.
She's actually, things.
Yes. She's a massively a pathological planner. So I like that random energy. I'll go with that.
But that shows everybody there's no correct way of doing this. I mean, there is literally no correct way of doing it. You just have to find your own path. And
and also just and have faith in it as well, and not question yourself or doubt yourself because you think that other people are doing it properly, because there is literally no proper way of doing it. It's it's amazing. A very peculiar process, and we've got a very strange job, haven't we? When you think about it. But you write in other areas too. You've done screenwriting, for example, which I couldn't countenance because it seems
so structure-based.
Exactly. Yes.
I mean, I'm currently trying to adapt someone else's shoes for an American TV company. And it's really challenging because traditionally I've adapted my own books for film, and they tend to follow the same narrative arc as the book. So, and because I write quite visually anyway, it's actually quite a straightforward, well, it's relatively straightforward process. But television, you're having to put it into chunks of 8, then you have to, so for example, the big structural problem I'm coming up against with Someone Else's Shoes is that for American television, and some of you American audience may have other thoughts, but they want both characters to cross paths in the first episode. And the problem is, without spoilers, the two women don't meet properly till quite some way into the book. So it's been a question of how do I make them do that thing?
No, don't make them do that.
No, we've worked out a way around it. I can't tell you. But you have to be so structurally creative.
Yeah.
And it's forcing me to think about narratives in a completely different way, which I have to say, at the age of 53, to be learning on such a steep learning curve is fun, is challenging, but it's fun and it's interesting. But yeah, I find screenplays much harder than writing books.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting, because I certainly, I've got a few books under option, and people often say, if you were ever asked to write the screenplay for one of your books, what would you say? And I would absolutely say no, and quite happily say no, and cede all control and just say, off you go, find someone who's really good at writing screenplays. Because that's the learning curve I've got no interest in going on. I very much see myself as a one-trick pony, and but I know if you push yourself
on a roll, that pony is on a roll, why break it? Yeah.
So the last thing I want to talk to you about before we hand it over to, I hope there's some really interesting questions there in the chat, because the viewers' questions are usually much more interesting than the interviewers' questions, I think. So all of the time I have known you, for these many 18 years, you've been a country girl. You have lived so far away that it makes my eyes water. As a born and bred city girl, he's made my eyes water thinking about how far away from London you lived, and the trials and tribulations for you to just get in to like meet us for lunch, and what have you. And now, oh joy, oh rapture, you live half a mile away from me. Why, and what are you doing here in the city, and how's it been for you making that move?
Yeah, well, it's good to shake things up every now and then. My kids had left home, and so suddenly it was just me rattling around in a big silent house with my dogs. I'd been mucking out horses for 20 years and my back was starting to complain. So they've gone to a livery yard just outside London, where somebody else does the hard work and I just get to stroke them and sit on them.
Yes,
and
perfect.
I realized during that whole period that we've been through, I don't even want to say lockdown because I feel like we're all sick of the word, that what mattered to me was connection. I just want to be around the people that I love. And in northwest London, which is where I'm now based, I not only have you, I have my daughter 2 streets away from me, and my best friend is a 20-minute walk from me, my best friend from school. So to have people I know and love within such a close walking distance just feels like a daily luxury to me. It really does. And also after 22 years of living 15 minutes drive from the nearest store, the idea that I can just walk outside and pick up a coffee and, I live near a fantastic Jewish bakery, Ronnie's, which does fresh bagels and bread every day, chicken soup if you want it, just all sorts of delicious desserts. I think I probably put on half a stone within the first month of living here. And the other thing I've done is basically bought takeout. I mean, you're talking to someone who couldn't get a pizza delivery within 20 miles for years and years and years.
No delivery.
I think the first month we lived in London with my 2 boys were staying at the time, I think we probably had takeout about 5 nights out of 7 because it was so exciting.
And not only are you close to the people who live here that you love, including me, but you're this far from central London, which means it's so much easier to connect with people who don't necessarily live so close. And I'm just a city girl. I love the thought of not living in the city actually brings me out in hives. And so I'm just absolutely delighted that you've made that move, and welcome. But I have to very quickly just add that Jojo is a city girl herself. She was born and bred in Hackney.
Yeah. It's just been a long time.
But yes, it's lovely to have you here. Well, Jojo, that's been absolutely fantastic. I want to see what questions we've been asked from the
let's have a look.
the viewers.
Yes, well, I'll go
So-
ahead and share some from the chat here. Let's see, you talked about the process of transferring your books to movies. This fan loves The Last Letter from Your Lover. What other movies have been made from your books, Jojo?
Well, Me Before You, The Last Letter from Your Lover, and in Germany there is The Horse Dancer. It's only available in the German language, but I did get to see a subtitled version of it, and it's very good. And then I've got quite a few others under option, so we're just, keeping our fingers crossed. Who knows?
Yes, wonderful. Do you write the same types of books you enjoy reading, or are there books that you like to read that you have no interest in writing? And is there anything you'd like to try writing that is very different from what you've written so far?
Ooh, no, I think I know what my strengths are now. And I mean, I love, Lisa's psychological thrillers. I couldn't do that. I don't know why. It's just not the way my brain
bet you
works.
could.
Well, the only thing I've ever been tempted to do, and I think my editor might be watching this and it'll probably make her go into a cold sweat. But I would like to write a book about a true life massacre in the Congo.
Well,
You
talk
heard
about
it
something
here
completely
first.
different. Yeah.
Which is very
heard
on
it
brand.
here.
I don't think there's many laughs to be had out of it, but as part of my research, I often go through old copies of Life magazine, and I found a kind of extraordinary story about a missionary family and a massacre in the Congo back in the 1960s. And it was just there were many pictures with it, and it just grabbed me. And yeah, if you ever see a book about the Congo written by a kind of Momo Joyce, you might it'll be me.
Oh, I
We'll
love
have
it.
cracked the code as to that pen name, right?
Oh, fantastic.
Somebody is wondering if there's a way that they can access the short story you mentioned about Lou.
Yes,
well-
I'd like to read that.
I guess we'll have to ask Pamela Dorman Books whether it still exists on the Penguin US website, and I can have a look and see if it still exists on the Penguin UK website. I know it was there for a while, a good long while, but I'm sure it exists somewhere.
Okay. Have to keep an eye out for that. Which of your own books, and I think this would apply to both of you, which of your own books are your favorite or are you most proud of? And who is your favorite character from all of your books?
For me, it's The Giver of Stars. It's a rare thing, at least, or I don't know if it's the same for you, but I loved every minute of writing that book in a way that I very rarely love every minute of writing a book. And it just felt like everything that was me came out in it. And I loved exploring a different rhythm to my writing. I loved trying to imitate the kind of lyricism of the people that I was writing about. And I just loved the subject matter, which was the horseback librarians of Kentucky. And I think my favorite character would be Marjorie, who was the lead librarian, who was a woman who genuinely didn't give a fig what anybody thought of her, just lived her own life without reference to what society thought. And I think, sometimes you write characters that you slightly envy or want to emulate. And for me, Marjorie is one of those. How about you, Lise?
I would say that my favorite of my books, certainly the one that I don't think I've ever felt that same level of intensity that you're talking about, Jojo, in any of my books. I'm just not that sort of writer. I'm quite compartmentalized. I sort of put some words on the screen and walk away. But the book that I think kind of dragged me into itself the most was The House We Grew Up In, which was one of my middle novels, and it's about a family blighted by their mother, the matriarch's obsessive compulsive hoarding disorder. And I loved writing that book. It was just because I knew what was, unlike most of my books, I knew what was going to happen at the end. It was a simple narrative arc. The book starts with a hoarded house, and by the end of the book, the house is going to be clean and empty, and the sun is going to be streaming through the windows, and I had no idea what was going to happen in between those 2 points. But filling that space between those 2 scenarios was just, with this big rambling family and all their trials and tribulations, was pure joy. I really enjoyed writing that book. And I think my favorite character is probably, and in fact, I was flailing around trying to find an answer to this question a few weeks ago in a Q&A, and one of the readers told me who my favorite character was. They reminded me about Alice Lake from I Found You, who is a single mother.
I love that character.
Yeah, she's such an awesome character. And I remembered that I'd taken her. There was this book, a little bit like Your Me Before You. There was this book I wanted to write that was quite difficult subject matter. And I kept telling people about this book I wanted to write. And everyone kept saying, no, 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 no. Nobody's going to want to read that book. Don't write that book. Don't write that book. So I actually did bin it. It could have been My Me Before You. You never know. But I kept Alice. I just thought, she's not going to be in that book, but she's coming with me wherever I go with the next book.
I'm going to speak to you about this verboten book afterwards.
I might even have had that conversation with you. You might have been one of the people saying, no, 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 no.
I don't think I would have done. I'm a great believer in writing the book that you're probably not supposed to.
Oh, right. Well, I didn't. And I wrote I Found You instead. But yeah, I kept Alice. So Alice is my favorite.
Okay. And actually, we do have the link to that short story in the chat. Thanks to Janine for finding it. But it looks like, yes, the publisher is there too. So thank you so much for that. You guys can click on that and read that later. Question from Jenna. How old were you when you first started writing and when you were first published?
Oh gosh, I've always written. I was an only child in an age of not very much TV, with very creative parents, and my mum once got down a big box from the attic which was basically full of exercise books in which I'd written long rambling stories about young girls with telepathic ponies who could understand every feeling that they had. But I probably didn't write a proper novel till I was in my mid-20s, because I wrote 3 that didn't get published before I got published, and I was published finally at age 31, I think. So yeah, I think those 3 books were probably early mid-20s to 30.
Yeah, so I didn't write. I wrote a lot of poetry as a child. But I was more interested. Yes, I was very good at poetry actually, but I was more interested in doing the illustrations alongside the poems. I'd get distracted and then just draw pretty flowers all over it. So I started writing my first novel when I was 26, so similar point in my life to Jojo, and I finished it when I was 28, and it was published the year I turned 31. Did you say 31? Oh,
yeah,
she did.
Yeah, so we were both 31 when our first novel.
Wow. Okay.
An auspicious
day. Yeah.
Indeed,
Yes.
indeed. Is there anything about yourself, personality, hobbies, passions that might surprise us?
I can go first with that.
Go on, you go first.
That I honestly am the most extraordinarily lazy. I have no hobbies, I have no passions, and I have no interests. I like being at home, I like walking the dog, I like watching television, I like eating, I like drinking, I like staring at my smartphone for hours and scrolling through Facebook and talking to my friends on WhatsApp. I like reading books, and that's it really. There's nothing. I don't have anything interesting that you would not have imagined. So Jojo. Oh, Pamela's saying that she.
Oh, I
one
know.
thing
I'm
about
just trying to
Jojo.
see
What is
that
it?
message says. I can think of one thing. Oh,
What is it?
I don't know.
We need
Well,
a clue, Pam.
If I'm meant to be surprising, same thing that Sam does.
Oh.
What does Sam do?
She
Boxing.
Oh
yeah, I did spend a couple of years boxing. That was yeah, with my weedy little hands, which is why my fingers are a bit lumpy now. I think the only hobby that I have that might surprise people is I collect antique paintings under the umbrella term women who've had enough of your and it's basically I collect pictures of really grumpy or disappointed looking women because they make me laugh, and you can get them from auction houses across England, and they're usually really cheap because no one wants a disappointed woman looking down at you. So I have a collection of about 8, ranging from the incredibly cheap, you know, where the postage costs more than the picture, to actually quite a lovely painting. But I'm in my new house, I'm going to create a wall of disappointed women. So there you
Which
go.
wall? Where's it going to be? Is it going to be like on a corridor so that they
Going up the
watch you
stairs.
walk past?
Going
Oh, up the stairs.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Very
love it.
nice. Well, if
I
people
love
don't
it.
want disappointing women looking at them, then maybe they need to do better so that we're not disappointed in the first
Yes,
place, right?
Exactly.
Let's do
Yes.
That's precisely an
And then you'll have the
it.
joyful women.
Yes, yes. Well, I know your editor here is here, Pamela. That sounds like an excellent gift book to me of women who are disappointed in you do better.
Oh, how
Um,
I've just seen a question. How honest are you when we critique each other's material?
Oh,
I think we're really honest.
yes.
Yeah.
I would not allow myself to be put in a position of looking at someone's work if I didn't think I was then going
Yeah.
to be able to be honest. If I thought that was going to cause any issues, or, well, number one, if Jojo Moyes asks you to look at her new book, I think we can all safely say that we wouldn't have that many concerns at the prospect. But yeah, I wouldn't put myself in that position. I would find a way to not do it if I thought it was.
I've done that once where I gave somebody a critique and I don't think he wanted to hear it, and he
Oh, it was a man.
back, yeah, by saying something like, wow, you don't hold back, do you? But I just think if I'm going to do this, I have to make it worth your while.
Yes.
And I'm going to be really honest, and
Right.
and maybe I'm not as diplomatic as I could be, but I don't know.
But I'm exactly the same with my
Yeah.
editing notes. When my editing notes come through, you have to just take a deep breath and think, this is for my own good. Someone is saying these things to me because they want this book to be the best book it can possibly
exactly
better. So I always take an incredibly positive approach to my edits when they come through. Obviously, occasionally something's going to rub you up the wrong way, but yeah, on the whole, it's a really positive thing. I love it.
Yeah.
So Fiona asked, says, you mentioned Jodi Picoult, who has just co-written a book with Jennifer Finney Boylan. Yes, it's called Mad Honey. It's delightful. We hosted both of them actually for an event last year. A great book. Would either of you like to co-write? And if so, who with? This is from someone who's actually supposed to come see you and wasn't able to attend in person. So glad you're here, Fiona.
I don't know if I could co-write a book. I don't know how I would go about it, or, I mean, your voice would have to be the same as theirs, and you would, I mean, I don't know about you, Lisa, but I carry so much of everything in my head. I can't possibly express that in any meaningful way to another writer, which might sound a bit weird, but I
can't even get it onto a post-it note, let alone to another writer. I would not like it.
I can write scripts with other people. I'm currently writing a script with somebody else. Again, I think with scripts, it depends on whether they match your level of diplomacy, whether they're likely to be hurt by a direct comment, or whether they are good at expressing themselves. I think that's about personality type, and whether each of you can accept criticism or change without your ego getting in the way, or whether you see something the same way. I mean, it could be problematic if you don't see something turning out the same way, then you've got a problem. But no, I don't think I'll ever co-write something. Now I'm thinking about it, I don't know how they did it.
No, it'd be like
there were 2 characters and they each wrote from a point of view of a different, so it was alternating chapters, so that they could be a little different that way. Yeah.
I could see, but I don't think Lisa and I will be doing
no.
I think you could do a joint commentary on the disappointed women. All right, so one more before we go. What are some of your other favorite authors that you like to read?
Oh, Lisa, do you want to go first?
Oh, I like all the writers who are like me, basically. I like all my contemporaries in the British. Well, I know there's a lot of American psychological thriller writers that I love as well. But I love Louise Candlish, I love Sabine Durrant, I love Claire McIntosh, I love Ruth Ware, I love American Wise, I love Ashley Audrain, I love Jean Hanff Karolitz. Yeah, so I just love female contemporary writers of psychological thrillers.
Great.
Yes.
Very unsurprising.
No, that's great. I mean, I'm one of these people. I tend to love whoever I've just read, as long as it stays with me. I love Lisa's one of my go-tos, and I'm not saying that to blow smoke up your bottom. You know that that's how I feel about you. Leanne Moriarty, I read everything she writes. I've just read a beautiful book by Claire Keegan called All the Beautiful Things, oh gosh, now I've forgotten the name.
Someone's going to be Googling it. They'll put it up on
Claire Keegan. It's a very
All the Small Things. There you go.
Is it All the Small Things?
Yes.
Thank you, All the Small Things. And it's a novella, and I think it took her 11 years to write it. And there is not a wrong word in it. It is so beautiful and poetic, and it has the best possible ending, and it's a whole big thing in a tiny book. And the other book I really loved, and I will read anything else she writes, is Gabrielle Zevin's Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which my daughter pressed on me and said, don't be put off by the fact that it's about computer gaming.
Yes.
And I went, like, I don't want to read a book about computer gaming. Small things like these, someone's just said, which
yes,
was
small
things like these. Sorry, it's been a long week. But Gabrielle Zevin's book, yes, it's notionally about creating computer games, but it's actually about power dynamics, friendship, love, disability, the art of creating something. And it has in it a climactic chapter that made me sob for an hour, and is the most original thing that I have read in years. So I'm really excited to see what she would do next.
She's
and
amazing.
My other kind of comfort reading is Lee Child, although he'll kill me for calling him comfort reading. But the same way that you said, when you pick up someone and you know from the first page, you know that you're going to get exactly what you need from that book, and you're not going to want to hurl it across the room at the end of the night because it's got a rubbish ending. You know, he's great.
Gabrielle Zevin is amazing. If you liked Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, you should. Young Jane Young is the one that she published before that.
Okay.
Talk about disappointing women. They're like that. It's fantastic, and she's great. Okay. She's great. And I will shout out. Chrissy made this recommendation in the chat as well. Remarkably Bright Creatures, actually written by an author who is local to us. And it's one of those books.
Oh, we've lost you.
Ginny! Ginny, come
Ginny,
I'm sorry, it's because my phone is paging me right now. I was like, oh, you don't need to
give us your recommendations again.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Not to leave you on suspense. Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. She is from our area. And it is beautiful. It is like, you didn't think you wanted to read a book about video games and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Yeah. You didn't realize you needed to read a book about a giant Pacific octopus, but that's Remarkably Bright Creatures, and you do. So yes. Okay. But I love all those recommendations. I think it's so fascinating to hear what other authors are reading, because you're also working on your own books, and some authors can't read while they're writing because it gets in their head too much. Do you do that too?
Yeah, okay. I read short stories when I'm writing. I have a kind of whole block of old New Yorkers that I never got around to reading, and then I read perfectly formed short stories that they do, and then just feel filled with envy and inadequate.
Well, at least it's a positive envy though, right? Yes. So yes, amazing. Well, I think it's most of the questions we got to in the chat then, but I love that this turned into a book recommendation, both in the chat and from both of you, because that is books, right? Books are, no matter what they're about or where you are, what time of day it is, it shares across the world. And both of you have books that do that in spades. So thank you so much to both of you for being here this afternoon, today. Just as a reminder, and I'll drop it in the chat again, there are signed copies of Jojo's new book available both at Midtown Scholar and Anderson's Bookshop. So you can go ahead and order those online to ship wherever you are today. And if you purchased a book that came with your ticket already, those will be shipped out to you if they're not already in the coming days. If you have additional questions about that timeline, please reach out to the bookstore that you purchased from. Thank you to both of you for being here, to all of our guests for being here. Happy reading, everybody. Happy writing to the both of you. And again, congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.
Congratulations,
Thank you,
Jojo.
Lisa. Thanks to everybody who's, sorry, I'm just reading all your comments now. I can't, my eyes aren't good enough to read them as we go along. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.